Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as every one of your kind always does.
You just called them all terrorists.
Well, it's nice you can put that
and this is what they always do.
There you go.
So hold on. I let you talk for a long time, so why don't you shut up for a second?
The civility level just dropped through the floor.
Do you accept, though, that Hamas's whole raison d'etre when it comes to Israel is genocide? They want to eradicate Israel and kill as many Jews as they can. I mean, they've made no secret of this.
Yeah, so this is really important. So I have no sympathy for Hamas. So I am not interested in defending Hamas. I think that's nothing but a distraction. Because right now they're not fighting Hamas. They're just...
So here's a good... here's some, I guess, persuasion tactics here. So I don't know if you noticed, I'll go back a second. So when Pierce is asking this question about Hamas, okay, watch Cenk's body language here.
They want to eradicate Israel and kill as...
Okay, so while Pierce is saying... Yeah, so while Pierce is saying Hamas wants to eradicate Israel, which is true, Cenk is shaking his head no. Okay, this is a really, really bad persuasion because it makes it instantly look like Cenk is saying, no, Hamas doesn't want to do that. But then when he starts talking, I don't know if that's Cenk's position. So I don't know what he's shaking his head no to exactly in that moment.
Right.
As many Jews as they can. I mean, they've made no secret of this.
Yeah, so this is really important. So I have no sympathy for Hamas. So I am not interested in defending Hamas. I think that's nothing but a distraction. Because right now they're not fighting Hamas. They're just killing Palestinian civilians.
Well, they're also killing Hamas terrorists. They are. I mean, they're killing thousands of them.
Barely. No, wait a minute. Barely. But let's go to your main point, okay? So the main point is, well, Hamas threatens X, Y, and Z and has killed 1,200 people on October 7th. So that is why we have to all worry about what Hamas might do
I don't think it's simple as that.
Hold on, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. At what they might do if they had infinite power, the kind of power that Israel has. Meanwhile, Israel is actually doing the genocide, is actually preventing a Palestinian state and saying you are not allowed to exist, and if you dare try to exist, we'll kill 20,000 of your children and women.
All right, Douglas, respond to that.
Okay, so before Douglas responds, so I think Pierce asked a fair question. I think Cenk's answer is not a good answer, because the point of the question about like acknowledging what Hamas wants is to show like, okay, number one, can Israel negotiate with Hamas in any sort of good faith, productive way going forward in the future? And number two, that is the explanation that Israel is giving as to why it's imperative for them to completely exterminate Hamas, root and stem as much as possible, is because this is an organization which is predicated on trying to, presumably genocide, all the Jews in Israel. And that's why Pierce is asking the question the way he's asking it. And Cenk, it doesn't answer it. He's just saying, well, he kind of punts, saying, well, it's not about the theoretical thing that Hamas is doing, it's what Israel's doing right now, which he could make that argument. He could say, yes, I understand Hamas wants to do all these things, but, I believe Israel is doing those things currently, and therefore, just because what Hamas maybe wants to do doesn't justify Israel basically causing, this level of civilian casualties or this level of damage to the area.
Right. And it does, it gets to the security concerns, obviously. Hamas did terrible things with all of the security precautions that Israel had already taken over the last, 5-6 years, whatever it was, since they had pulled out. Actually, I think it's closer to like 15 years, right? They pulled out in 2006. So they have all of these security precautions, and they still manage to do this horrific thing that's still ongoing. There are still people that have been captured that are prisoners of war there. So
they're still shooting missiles, which is kind of crazy. But
so I just look, it's to say that it is Hamas's intentions are a distraction.
That's not accurate. Yeah,
and that's not accurate at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could say that the response is not a good response, but you have to acknowledge the intentions because they're important. And I think actually this is sort of related. I think what Israel and I think what the rest of the world should learn from this, from October 7th, is there's kind of this idea where if you have a smaller country or a smaller force of like rebels or insurgents who are kind of like doing these like little attacks that are not super effective, that the bigger, more powerful country just sort of ignores it, right? So, for years, ever since 2005, 2006, every so often Hamas would shoot a bunch of rockets at Israel, and Israel has Iron Dome. So most of the time, it didn't really like accomplish anything. And so Israel would just kind of ignore it. And this is showing, I believe, that you can't really have that attitude going
Right.
forward.
Yeah.
That if there is a group of people that are just attacking you, you have to act upon it. You have to stop them, even if it's not doing anything, because it means that they're willing, presumably, they're willing to do something horrible. And I wonder if this is going to happen here, because I think now there's a lot of weird politics at the moment in terms of isolationism. But I think right now that Biden is looking really weak in terms of the Houthis, the Houthi rebels
Yeah,
who,
there's a lot going on now.
yeah, who keep attacking various ships. They keep attacking American ships. I believe recently there was some kind of suicide drone that was going to fly into a barracks that a bunch of American troops were in, but it just by happenstance it didn't work, and that's the only reason that those people didn't die. And it gets to it's like, okay, well, just because they're attacking us and it's ineffective, like to me, it's like, oh, that shouldn't even be a thing. People should be afraid to attack American troops, okay? And they should not feel safe to attack American troops in these little ways. And I know there's like a weird political pressure so that, you know, there's a lot of isolationism on the right, so they're not necessarily going to want Biden to go declare war on the Houthis. Um, but I think he needs to start blowing the shit out of them. If they're attacking American troops, he needs to start fucking dropping bombs on these fucking people. I mean, it's just, I
Did they
don't
do an
think,
airstrike inside Iraq? I think I saw a
or,
thing on.
and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they did. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and attacked them in Yemen. Like,
Look,
I just,
things
to
are
me,
picking up fast here, Sitch.
I'm just saying they shouldn't, if
We're firing
you're,
bombs in Iraq.
if you're, attacking my military, okay,
Right.
how am I'm just supposed to sit here and just shrug and be like, well, I guess, I'm just gonna let that happen. Like, you're supposed to just let them keep attacking your military until it's successful? Like, that's crazy to me. It's like, no, you're attacking my military, I'm gonna take you out.
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing. The constant argument about proportionality.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me because and it's, I mean, I admit it's somewhat on an intuitive level, but just the levels of atrocities that were committed on October 7th. I mean, it's not about body count. It really isn't. It really isn't for
What do you
me.
mean?
So, well, I just a lot of the people that are on the pro-Palestinian side, they just want to etch out the numbers. They want to say, look, they got 1,200 people in Israel. You have 1,200 people. You're allotted 1,200 casualties of war.
Right, right.
And I'm thinking, I mean, the level of terrorism that took place on that day, for me, it doesn't add up. That the number of, we're not talking about numbers of bodies here.
Sure.
We're talking about
Yeah.
neutralizing a threat.
Well,
So, but I do think there is probably a kind of a rage component going. Israel is a very small country, and these people who are fighting were conscripted because, their fellow Israelis were treated horribly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think that I agree with you, it's not just like a numbers thing, it's the type of violence definitely plays into our intuitions about what is the correct response. If the if Hamas had like sent an airplane or a bomb or something, kind of like a 9/11 style, and like killed 1,400 Jews in Israel. I mean, it would still, or 1,400 people, because a lot of non-Jews died too. um it would definitely get a response, and there'd still be a lot of anger and trauma and tragedy. but it hits you very different than like a sort of barbarian horde coming across the border to kind of like rape and pillage and kidnap people. Like it just hits you this completely different way.
Yeah, they've taken women as sex slaves. That they're in Gaza right now.
Right.
I mean, that seems obvious to me. As much as people tried to deny it, that seems completely obvious. And supposedly they've interviewed all the women that they've got back, and they've all been sexually assaulted. So
Really?
yeah.
I didn't know
So
that.
it seems incredible to me that that's not obvious. You made the assumption that the reason that they fired during the ceasefire was because that they couldn't give up the women that they had sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're not done sexually assaulting them. Seems like
Yeah. Well, I think it's
the
I think
obvious
it's more
conclusion.
right. And I'm sure that that's still happening. I think it's more though they didn't give them up not because they're like, well, we want to keep our sex slaves. I think it was more that they just when the ceasefire was happening, the global conversation was fixated on the sexual assault claim. And so they knew it would be too bad for them if they released a bunch of women who did say that they were sexually assaulted.
Right. But evidently they have interviewed those women and they have been sexually assaulted.
Yeah. Well, I know that they had interviewed women who were released who were older, um, who said that they knew other people were sexually assaulted,
Okay.
like the old women, that or they either saw it or they just heard about it. But it's the psychology of this is just fascinating to me because it's kind of like okay, so if they were like on a weird level, like why does it matter if women were sexually assaulted or not in terms of like so if your argument is Israel's killing too many innocent people, the fact that women were sexually assaulted on October 6th or that the kidnapped women were sexually assaulted, like should it not really matter one way or the other?
Well,
And yet intuitively we all know that it does matter. Like it's going to affect the emotions of people involved in their decision making.
this gets into the identity politics of it. Now I think identity politics, when it's involved, the psychology of it usually involves a person that feels a certain affinity towards a group that they're a member of. And when things are done to that group that degrade the status of that group, they themselves feel that their status has been degraded. So this is classic identity politics. When the people of Israel have been degraded in this way by Hamas, that's where the sexual assault component comes in.
Sure, right.
And it's
Yeah.
one of the things that I also think is going on with Cenk and why Cenk can't necessarily be impartial in this conversation, because you can tell it just oozes out of him that he feels the treatment of the Palestinian people is degrading their status and by association degrading his status. He grew up as a Muslim, so he even that comes up. He accuses him of being racist towards him as a Muslim. Look, I think Cenk has probably experienced racism in his life. I think a lot of people who have experienced racism can become kind of the social justice warrior type fighters against racism because they've experienced it themselves. But
Right.
I do think that's part of what's going on here. And I just look, I just look at that. I don't know if you can avoid that very root psychology. Like if I don't have, you are not Israeli, you're Jewish. I mean, I can't, I feel horrible for what happened on October 7th, but I feel like I would feel it 10 times harsher if I was Jewish. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter that are Jewish that are like just horrified by all of this stuff. It hits them at a emotional level so much deeper. And that's the identity politics.
Yeah. No, I think you're completely correct in terms of how it affects people and how if they associate with the group, they feel like it is an attack on them. I don't feel that way but I'm probably a bad person to use as the paradigm here because I'm like a super weirdo individualist, and I have been for most of my life. Like
Well,
even if like this happened to Americans, like I would be think it's horrible, but I don't know if I would feel it on some like personal level, like the way that you're describing. And but I think that's just like my own weird worldview. But I definitely think that you're correct that that's what's happening with Cenk, 100%. At least the way that he seems so emotionally reactive to it, it feels like he's having this sort of personal experience, and that he feels like in some sort of like alternate world, he would have been there getting bombed and everyone wouldn't care. Like that seems to
right.
be like the emotional way that he's kind of reacting to all this stuff.
We
But yeah.
do. I mean, we do experience it a little. Well, I mean, I experience it with the American stuff. Maybe you're not actually experiencing it. And you talked about them attacking Americans on military bases and stuff like that. You feel nothing.
Well, no, see, it's interesting because my feeling isn't like I'm not like, oh, how it's not like an emotion of like this is an attack on me. It's more like if I'm thinking from the perspective of if I'm the president and how am I viewing the extension of US forces, and the attack on US forces is an attack on my country and me, and what would I do in that situation and why am I like it's more like why is this allowed is like the thing that's kind of like hitting me more than the attack, if that makes sense.
Right.
But anyway, the other thing I wanted to bring up, which is kind of interesting to me, the psychology aspect of this, is that like the thing about the sexual assault, it's weird. Like I get it, but it's still weird. And I think it's interesting to think about how, like, say for example, you're like, oh, Hamas people, they killed, 5 Israelis, right? And so therefore, in some people's minds, it's like, well, they killed 5 Israelis in this attack. And so therefore, there's some like mathematical calculation that occurs where it's like, well, okay, is like the Israeli army is justified in killing, you know, 10 Palestinians, and it's okay if 5 of them are not Hamas as long as the 5 that are Hamas get killed, right? There's like this like weird like calculation in everyone's mind that's all intuitive, like no one's actually like doing these numbers. But
Right.
then,
That's, yeah, fairness.
right, yeah, there's something that's going on there. But then if you add sexual assault into the mix and you say, well, not only did Hamas kill 5 Israelis, but they like sexual assaulted, 5 Israeli women, that like changes the intuitive math. So it's like, oh, well, that justifies,
Dramatically.
yeah, like dramatically. It's like, well, that suddenly justifies the Israeli army from killing like 30 people, and 25 of them could be like not Hamas as long as you kill like the 5 Hamas. And it's fascinating to me that that is going on. I haven't heard anyone like verbalize what I just said, but that's what's happening. That is the intuition that underlies this entire conversation about sexual assault. And that's why a lot of the more pro-Israeli side wants to like fixate on it, and why the anti-Israeli side, pro-Palestinian side, wants to like pretend like it didn't
Downplay
happen.
it. Yes.
It's because everyone knows, even though no one's talking about it, that there's this like weird like this is math intuition that's going on where the sexual assault claim justifies emotionally like killing more innocent people.
Yeah, look, I understood that like immediately.
We all
So,
do, but I
yeah.
just haven't heard anyone like bring it up. It's weird.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway,
We'll
Several
bring it
things.
up here.
yeah, well, that's what we're here for. Okay.
First of all, anyone who uses the term genocide in this context simply doesn't know what they're talking about, or is a malevolent actor.
Okay. So we had maybe in the beginning, we had the weapon of mass distraction. Could have been an attack on Douglas Murray. Not maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But then Douglas Murray has a very strong attack right out of the gate, saying that Cenk is either stupid. No, doing the classic either Cenk is evil or stupid.
So this is the first personal attack, right?
It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first like very clear personal attack. And you can see Cenk's reaction.
Mr. Uyghur's traveled at all in his life, how far he's traveled, how many conflicts he's seen.
Oh my
But
God.
And there's the second personal
Yeah, he's just
attack.
playing it out.
Oh man.
guessed none. And you clearly know nothing about this particular conflict, and you've obviously seen none of it. The genocide that you describe.
There was 3.
I know. I'm like, he's going to keep going. This is, look, I believe this is the first, this is the clip that went viral, right? Where he just basically eviscerates him.
Yeah.
I just, look, we've had Cenk on a couple of times, and Cenk interrupts and like doesn't really make a lot of room for you to talk. I'm thinking, this is a time to interrupt, Cenk. This is a time to stop him. Right?
Right.
I do think interrupting would have been a better debate tactic.
Well,
here.
I mean, the way it was kind of structured is like Douglas kind of went on for some time, and then Cenk kind of went on.
I
for
know,
some time,
but look, just get in there. This is obviously the gloves are coming off here. Do you agree? I mean, a lot of the, or do you disagree? A lot of the clips going around are just, I mean, Cenk just sitting there taking it. I don't think it's a good clip for Cenk.
No, you're probably right. And if, again, I don't know if Cenk's comment about weapons of mass destruction was supposed to be an insult against Douglas or Israel. Cenk kind of, he kind of this in our conversation, he sort of conflates a bunch of different groups of people together when he's talking.
Which is not good.
Which is not good. It's not really clear what he's talking about, who he's talking about. But yeah, I mean, if he wasn't insulting Douglas, he should have, he could have insulted. I mean, he could have interrupted him, called out, these ad homs and stuff, and said, like, well, made some arguments or made some point about how this is, indication that you don't really have an argument because you have to start with a bunch of insults or whatever. And, maybe that would have been, it would have nullified the viral clip. It's sad that when you're like a bigger internet personality, you have to constantly be thinking in terms of like, oh, someone's going to clip this. And I have to like, act in a way to prevent the clipping from occurring. Like, instead of just trying to act in a way that'd be productive for a conversation.
I don't think Cenk thinks about that stuff, in all honesty. Do you?
He might not, but you should, but you have to, which is sad.
Look, do you? I guess Cenk has made it this far not thinking about it.
I mean, you don't have to. I'm just saying if you want to prevent, these sorts of
like,
things
if you want
happening.
to avoid just this kind of viral clip.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Look, which I would want to avoid myself. Like you said, I'm not debating Douglas Murray. What are you, crazy? What are you, insane?
Right.
Is such a smear and a libel against the Jewish state. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, I'm sure it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't remotely want to. And people like you and other pro-Palestinian propagandists have spent years claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza. By the way, the weirdest thing about this claim is that the population of the Gaza has grown by 1 million in the last 15 or so years. So if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, it's either the worst perpetrator of genocide ever or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. And it's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as everyone of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said that the world cried. You said that the people.
Wait. Okay, wait. So before we get into the Mindkind thing, which I want to back up because I kind of missed it. What is interesting that I agree that like calling it, saying Israel's trying to genocide Gaza, and they've been doing that for years. I mean, I don't agree with any of that. I don't think any of that's remotely true. And Cenk is, I think, very foolish and dumb for throwing that charge, especially in this conversation. He would be much more. He would have a better argument if he tried to throw out the ethnic cleansing argument. The whole like they just want to displace them and not let them come back, which I don't know if that's true, but at least it'd be easier to argue that than the genocide argument.
Right.
But the thing that's interesting to me, and I'm not super familiar with Douglas Murray's background, but he seems like really emotionally attached to this topic, and I don't know why that is exactly.
Isn't Douglas Murray's Jewish?
Is he?
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't think he is. Murray is a very not Jewish last name.
I was always on the assumption, maybe I'm incorrect, but I thought Douglas Murray is Jewish, and that was obvious why he's, let's just look it up. Unless it's
Murray
like
has described himself as an atheist, having been Anglican until his 20s. No, he describes himself as a cultural Christian and a Christian atheist. He is not Jewish.
Okay.
Yeah,
Look at this. He's
Murray is not
atheist
a
for
Jewish
Jesus. He's an atheist for Jesus.
Yeah, no, I didn't think he was Jewish. So yeah, so
Okay.
that's why it is interesting to me, like why he's so. I mean, I know he's very anti-Islam, and maybe that's part of
Mhm.
it, but he seems to have like a very strong emotional thing going on here.
Okay.
So
Look, my Jewish people dar is bad.
yeah, like I get, when Alan Dershowitz is like so pro-Israel, it's kind of like holy shit, right?
Right.
First perpetrator of genocide ever, or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. It's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as every one of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said
Okay, so
The your kind. I count that as the fifth insult in this tirade, so I'm
well,
trying to keep track.
maybe. I mean, listen, I don't think obviously Cenk took this as some sort of like racial or religious slight. I don't believe that was the intention at all.
No, he means pro-Palestinian.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
kind, yeah, in this pro-Palestinian
Right.
argument.
Like a progressive Palestinian defender. Yeah, that'd be my interpretation of the comment, but
Yeah.
said that the world
do you mean,
cried,
my kind?
a world cried, you said that the people like you who cover for the Palestinian extremists. Thirdly, you
oh, see, that's good. So he did
He
respond.
clarifies,
He
yeah.
did, yeah, he did. So there you go. That was smart.
said that the world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't. And you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was
Douglas,
very
let me
much
put this
care
to you.
for that
Let me
around
put
the
this to you,
world.
Douglas. Quick,
Let me make two other
Yeah.
very quick points. Firstly, you said what Hamas might do, as if it was some kind of hypothetical. Hamas showed what they do, what they want to do. It showed it on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that again and again until they have got rid of every Jew. So, I don't know. I would trust Hamas's word on that rather than your interpretation of what you think they mean when they say that, and your generous interpretation of what you think that means. And finally, as for preventing a Palestinian state, it is nonsense that the Israelis have prevented a Palestinian state. They gave the Gazans
Well,
a
because they have
Palestinian
one, right?
state in 2005. They gave them a Palestinian state in 2005 when every Jewish person was ripped from their homes in the Gaza by IDF soldiers. And the Palestinian people were given a state. And what did they do? They voted in Hamas, who then killed their fellow Palestinians, never had another election, and used all the billions of dollars of taxpayer funds from the US, UK, and Europe to build terror tunnels and to enrich themselves so they could live the life of luxury in Qatar. Again and again, the reason there is not a Palestinian state is because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want one.
Okay, Douglas,
Didn't want one in
All right,
1947,
Douglas.
it preferred war, and it doesn't want one now.
Douglas,
Do you want to
So-
comment on that, on
On the what?
the Palestinian state thing? Because I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with his argument here. I'm like, Hamas never really made any effort to govern. I mean, all they did was conscript resources to basically wage war against Israel. They never,
Yeah.
they never tried to govern the Palestinian people in any way, shape, or form.
No, I mean Douglas is 100% correct when what he said there, especially at the end. And you're completely correct. Hamas has made no effort to really govern the country. They were basically just stealing resources in order to continue to wage war against Israel. I think part of that is just because of their ideology is horrible. I think part of it's also because they're waging their own civil war against the PA and the West Bank. And so
Right.
this was kind of how they differentiated themselves as like, we're the hip revolutionaries, and they're like, the cow towers.
Right.
And so I think that's
yeah.
kind of why they were doing what they're doing. But And I think that when Cenk or other people who are, kind of more on the Palestinian side, like it annoys me because there just doesn't seem to be a level of either honesty or clarity of thought or view or perception to just see what is real,
Yeah.
like about Hamas and about this thing. Because I think Cenk, and we'll play it in a second. I think Cenk talks about how they always kind of make this argument about how, like, oh, well, it's not a real country because Israel didn't, like, they controlled what could be shipped in and out of the country. And it's like, well, that's not really,
That's not
that's a
true.
complete, like,
Yeah.
pivot, or that's like a complete distraction. Because you say, well, even if Israel's like preventing them from getting certain weapons and certain other resources that Israel thinks they're going to use for weapons, that, if Hamas had spent the last 15, almost, or 16, 17 years not attacking Israel, not shooting missiles at them, not building these, tunnels or any of this other crap, and they've just been actually trying to govern Gaza well and build everything up, like, there would be no excuse for Israel to be doing what it's doing whatsoever, and the whole world would be saying you can't, restrict trade on it on Gaza. They're doing all this stuff. They're not attacking. They're not doing anything wrong.
Right. If they tried to beat them economically instead of violently,
Yes,
it'd be a
right.
completely different game. Yeah.
Well, though there is another issue here too, which we haven't really talked about, which is there's all these. The problem is, like, the Palestinian people and their culture has been so indoctrinated with, like, horrible
Yeah.
ideas and
About
violence.
Israel. Yeah. And Jewish people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, so even if, like, because we have to remember too, everyone wants to point to ideology. Don't get me wrong, ideology is important, right? But we all understand rules for rulers here. Okay. So if Hamas is acting the way it's acting, it's doing it for an ideological reason, but there's also a cynical, pragmatic reason. And something that's also I haven't really heard other people talk about is, as there were other groups, other, like, kind of
Yeah.
terrorist,
Competing groups that they killed off.
right, competing Ghazian terrorist groups in the region that were attacking Israel and doing all these other stuff. And there's, like, this weird situation where if Hamas gains power and then they say, hey, we're going to, like, play ball with Israel and we're not going to, like, be violent, that gives an in to the other violent groups to say, you guys are a bunch of cucks.
Yep.
The people of Gaza should support us instead of Hamas. And so there's, like, always these, like, weird power plays and psychology going on in these situations for why these groups kind of behave in the messed up ways that they
The
behave.
exact same thing is going on in Israel with Bibi Netanyahu.
Yes,
Why do you think
right.
Bibi Netanyahu was courting these radical right-wing settler
Right.
groups? Because
Yeah.
he needed them to stay in power.
Yeah. No, it's 100%, 100%. Yeah.
So we put one point by Queen Rania of Jordan in a new piece for, I think it was the Washington Post. In just over 2 months, she said Israel's turned Gaza into a hellscape. At least 8,000 children have died, more than the death tolls of Pearl Harbor, September the 11th, and Hurricane Katrina combined. These are gigantic and horrendous numbers of children being killed. Do you not have any...
So I never noticed this. Does Douglas Murray have, like, Tourette's or something?
Because he's doing the eye thing?
Yeah, he's doing, like, a weird eye thing. I never noticed.
I feel
that
like
before.
he got an eyelash in his eye or something. It seemed like he was trying to get an eyelash out of his eye. So, but he is
maybe.
doing this weird, like, wide eye thing.
Okay.
But look, when I get an eyelash in my eye, I do the exact same thing.
Right. Maybe.
qualms about the number of children being killed? I mean, does it not suggest that Israel...
I want to hear Queen Rania talking about this as much as I want to hear Queen Camilla or Meghan Markle. I mean, it's pathetic. Queen Rania is holding on to her own position in Jordan. The only piece of advice she has for anyone is how to marry a king. Queen Rania herself is just playing a very nasty political game. If she cared at all, and I would pose this to all the states in the region, if Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in. They
right,
would
Cenk,
take them in.
let me
They
get
don't
Cenk-
want them.
let me
If
get
the
Cenk-
Egyptians wanted them, they'd take them in, but they don't. Do you know why? Because every country that takes in the Palestinians gets terror. It happened in Egypt, it happened in Jordan, it happened in Syria, it happened in Lebanon, it happened in Tunisia, on and on. That's why these people don't really care about their fellow Muslims. They just care about hating Jews.
All right, Cenk, your
Cenk
response.
Cenk is shaking his head no, but I mean, I think Douglas Murray is right on the facts there. It seems like every time they do take Palestinian refugees, they end up challenging the powers that be. They do that, you guys are cucks to Israel thing and challenge their power.
No, I mean, well, yeah, what Douglas said about how every country that takes in Palestinians ends up getting terrorism that is true. I
Right.
understand that is like just factually true in all these regions, and that is a big reason why they don't want to absorb the populations. Now, maybe there was, some time in the early days, in the late 40s or 50s, where they could have had absorbing these populations and they chose not to. But now I don't know, how, how that could be a situation. I mean, the only thing I would say is the only critique I'd say, I don't know how fair it is to say that the leadership of these countries just want to hate Jews, because I think a lot of it is just cynical. I think they just want to use, because a lot of the leadership of the surrounding Arab countries actually wants to economically work with Israel for their own economic benefit. But the population of the countries has been so kind of indoctrinated with anti-Semitism and anti-Israel feelings for so many years that it's like they're afraid to, I guess. They're afraid of like pissing off the population.
Well, you look, it's a recipe for disaster. If you have a population that is indoctrinated with this anti-Semitism, and you as a leader of that population wants to work with Israel, and then you're going to invite a bunch of rabble-rousers in who are just going to incite that population against you, come on. That's not going to end well.
Sure, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you asked if he cared about 8,000 dead babies, and his answer was no. Queen Rania bothers me, so complete non-answer, because he doesn't care. He doesn't think that Palestinians' lives are worth anything.
Well, okay, so regarding this, I guess you could argue that he should have said, like, it is awful that these people are dying, which is true. I assume that is his position. And I think there is a lot of like kind of debate mode. Like I can't agree with any like possible thing that the other side says, coming from both Douglas and Cenk in the conversation. And Douglas should acknowledge that. But that aside, I do think rhetorically, persuasively, his response to the question, even though it was nothing but really ad homs, was very effective. It was effective. Just say like she's some idiot queen who doesn't know anything about anything. Why should we listen to what she's saying? Which
Douglas Murray's response was effective.
Yeah, it was rhetorically effective, even if it is sort of not logically coherent. He's not really addressing the argument. Even though I think the argument was stupid, it doesn't really make sense to compare like the people that have died in this conflict to the people that have died in completely different conflicts or completely different natural disasters that exist for completely different reasons. It doesn't make sense necessarily to make those comparisons.
Right.
Which, I mean, you can say that, but that's not really, which is true, but it's not really persuasive. So I don't really fault him for kind of going on the ad hom, which is funny, saying like, oh, well, she's an idiot queen. I don't care what no one should really care what she says about the topic.
Right.
He just called them all.
Nice, you can put that
and this is what they always do.
There you go.
So hold on, I let you talk for a long time. So why don't you?
And that is true. He didn't say.
He didn't say
Cenk,
that. No.
Yeah, Cenk is putting words in his mouth, which is not fair, obviously. So, but
shut up for a second.
Oh, okay.
This is where like the civility level just dropped through the floor.
Sure.
are worth
soon as-
anything. He just called them all
Well, it's
terrorists.
nice you can put that word's
and this is
words
what
into
they
my
always
mouth,
do.
but there you go.
So hold on, I let you talk for a long time. So why don't you shut up for a second? So
you're such
we've
a
got all of
courteous
these
man as
dead
well.
babies. We've got all.
What's he say there?
You're such a courteous man as well.
Oh, okay.
Which, to be fair to Cenk, I mean, Douglas Murray hits him right off the bat with the "you're either stupid or evil," so it's not exactly like, you know.
Well, I
Like,
mean,
okay.
he was responding to the genocide thing, so.
I know, I get it, but I'm just saying, like, you know, he hit him with the 3 ad homs, like, literally right off the bat. So,
Right,
you know,
yeah,
Cenk
yeah,
tells him to
yeah.
shut up. It's like, okay, I mean,
Look,
Cenk
I
hits him
just
with the
look-
"you don't care about genocide," you know, then he hits him
After
with
the
the
sh-
straw
after the
man,
sh-
then he hits him with the "shut up." So it's just like,
I think the shut up is a little late. Like the shut up should have came second ad hom in.
right,
when he
maybe.
started really going at it, yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
All of these dead babies that this monster doesn't care about. He says keep bombing them.
See, I just this is so bad. This is where it all falls apart for me because that is it's a bad argument and I don't think it's true. I think he does obviously care about collateral damage. Everyone cares about collateral damage. Like you don't lose anything for caring about collateral damage. Why even argue the point, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree. I would imagine Douglas Murray is a person of normal consciousness
Right.
who, you know, thinks it's awful if 8,000 innocent children have been killed. I agree that, well, I don't agree because no one said this except for me. Douglas Murray should have said that before launching into his attack on
Right,
the
yeah.
Queen. He should have said that this is a tragedy. And I don't think he would have lost anything persuasively to do that. I think,
Right.
unfortunately, that is a kind of a debate mode of I can't agree with anything anyone says that's on the other side. And maybe that could have prevented this exchange, or maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. Because from Cenk's, like, I think Cenk is so much in his own bubble. I think he honestly thinks Douglas Murray doesn't
Is
like
evil, yeah. He
is
doesn't
evil and is totally fine with all these Palestinian things. I think that is Cenk's honest position. I think it's wildly untrue. So, you know, I don't know if that would have prevented this from happening or not if he just made that acknowledgement. But
care. Yeah, he would have thought he was lying. He was trying to cover.
right, or
yeah.
saving face
hiding
for
his
the
power
camera.
level.
Right, yeah.
In the debate with Malcolm Gladwell also admitted to being in that bubble and just believing Douglas Murray was like this alt-right online provocateur, right?
Right.
Douglas
right.
Murray has this reputation that I don't get it. I really don't get it. You read his stuff or look at or watch his talks. He seems eminently reasonable.
Well, you know, he's very, I mean, I get it. He's very anti-woke. He's very
Right.
anti-progressive. He's very biting in the way that he talks and writes. Which
I
obviously, if
don't
you're,
really think so though. I mean,
think
I
he
don't think he goes into ad hominem and stuff like that.
well, I mean, he did in this conversation, obviously.
Yeah, but yeah, obviously.
But even if
Hmm.
he's not ad homing, he's a very good speaker. So he's very good at, you know, making these sort of biting comments. And like, if you look at sort of the breakdown of this conversation, it shows Douglas Murray's skill because even though, as we point out, he's like the first three things he says are all ad homs to Cenk, and yet the way in which he sort of words them, they like, and then he kind of like words these ad homs that are like they're ad homs, but they're not. I don't know. Maybe it's the way he's speaking. Maybe it's the way he phrases it. They don't come across as like super rude. And then he follows it up with like an actual factual argument. And then when Cenk tells him to like shut up, and then says you don't care, like Cenk. Here's the thing. Here's the difference. Douglas Murray is like a surgeon, okay, or like maybe here's a better thing. He's like a skilled assassin, right? So he's like throwing all these like attacks at Cenk with like a precision level,
Right.
so that unless you're like super paying attention, they can kind of slip by undetected, or they just don't seem to be like so on the surface. But Cenk is like Jason, okay, from like the horror movies. He's just like a blunt instrument who's just like smashing you with a hammer. So he's like, shut up. You don't care about the 9,000 or 8,000 children that died. Like, it's just all so blunt so that if you don't already agree with Cenk's position, it comes off like so much worse, even if Douglas was
Right.
like starting it.
Douglas has the palladium on a umbrella.
Right.
Cenk is running around in a hockey mask.
Yeah, with a giant sledgehammer, just like trying to smash you into bits. And it's like, okay, it just, doesn't come across,
Yeah. Good
A former
analogy.
intelligence officer said in the Israeli press they're using AI in a program called The Gospel, where he said it's basically a mass assassination factory. And we could all see it with our own eyes. And you can do all the propaganda you want. No one believes your nonsense. We see all the dead women. We see all the dead children. Now Israel has killed 20.
See, this is really bad too, because he throws out this thing about the AI and the mass assassination, but he's not really, he doesn't put it in the context of any kind of argument. Like, is his argument that they are killing indiscriminately because they want the entire population dead? I mean, it seems like that's his argument, but it's just not.
Well, so Cenk's position, which is what he told us, is that he thinks that Israel just wants to kill indiscriminately as many Palestinians as possible and to just kind of push them all out of Gaza in order to just take the land. Like, they're intentionally ethnically cleansing the
Right.
Palestinians. That's his position. I don't even know now in terms of like his persuasion, his argument. I don't even know what he's talking about when he brings up this
Yeah, the
AI
fact
gospel
about
thing.
the AI thing. Yeah, it
Right.
sounds totally conspiratorial.
Or he didn't really explain what he's talking about. I just Googled it now. I found some Al Jazeera article. Now, Al Jazeera is obviously insanely biased about the situation. But then they kind of cite a different article that says this was an investigation by Plus 972 magazine. I mean, have you ever heard of this publication?
Oh yeah,
Plus
that's a
972
really
magazine.
No, obviously not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're about or something. So I mean, it's not to just throw that out there. I don't know what that means. He'd have to actually explain it a little bit better. But
Well, and I mean, if you're going to make this claim, that's a giant. That's like a 9/11 was an inside job level claim there, don't you think?
Well,
I mean, you need a.
It's I would say it's not quite to there. I mean, it's close.
Really?
Like,
Really?
9/11 is inside job.
Hold on.
Another level down.
Israel's plan is to just kill all of the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Well, no, was that what his claim was, or is that they want to ethnically cleanse and push them out of Gaza?
Well, I don't. He hasn't made that clear, but obviously, if he's saying that they're using bombs on these people indiscriminately and they don't care about life and limb, then it seems like the argument he's making is that they're just going to kill them all. That's not a 9/11 was an inside job level conspiracy.
If the claim is they want to literally exterminate them all, I would agree with you, right?
Yes, yeah, that's like a giant claim.
Right. If the claim is they just don't care about civilian casualties or they want
that's
to...
a much lower claim.
Right. Then I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess I agree.
But I do think that he's making the harder claim. I do think he's saying that they want to, he said genocide. What do you think he means by that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I shouldn't use the term genocide, but he's very skewed on this whole situation.
Let's just say he means genocide. He means genocide in the literal sense.
Right.
Israel just wants to kill every single person in Gaza, every single Palestinian in Gaza. That's a giant claim that you need a lot of facts to back up. Well, I don't know that I'd walk into a debate like this and make that claim.
Right.
But I guess the claim is so common on the progressive side that it's just like, oh, of course, that's obvious, right?
So I found kind of the article that's talking about the thing he's talking about. Now, these are all anonymous sources, and you guys know how I feel about anonymous sources, right? So anonymous source said, quote, "Nothing happens by accident when a 3-year-old girl is killed in a home in Gaza. It's because someone in the army decided it wasn't a big deal for her to be killed. That is a price worth paying in order to hit another target. We are not Hamas. They're not random rockets. Everything is intentional. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is in every home." Okay.
How is that possible? How is that even possible?
Well, first of all, I don't know how that could be. I mean, that's like a level of surveillance that I don't think exists. Number one. Number two, that contradicts Cenk's earlier argument when he talked about unguided bombs and munitions being used.
Right.
So he's kind of mixing arguments here. But number three, and this is what I said at the beginning of the stream, it's unclear to me, and I think the pro-Palestinian side has done a very bad job at that. Well, actually, I don't know if they have done it. Maybe this is intentional. It's unclear to me, I think Israel's done a bad job of this, how civilians die. Because is it that Israel doesn't warn people and then they blow up an area that has civilians in it and those people had no warning and they die? Or is it that they warn people, that people make a decision they warn people in like a general area, like they say, hey, everyone in this building or everyone in a mile radius, you should leave, right? And you have 1 hour to leave or whatever. And then people don't leave and then they die. Like, is that why people? So it's not clear to me how civilians are dying the way that they're dying.
Yeah, either way, I mean, that doesn't look good. They're not going to want to. They're not going to want to advertise that either way.
Well, no, but like, yeah, but if they say, hey, because they make the claim that they tell people to evacuate, right? And if they don't evacuate, then you say, well, we told them, right? I mean, it still looks bad, but it gives them a little bit of protection.
Right.
Rhetorical protection, that is.
Times the number of civilians that Hamas killed. So would I want Hamas in charge of Israel? Never, never. I don't trust them, and I don't believe that they would be benign. So all of this propaganda about, people don't mind Hamas. No, we mind Hamas. We terribly what happened on October 7th. And I've now shown you different Israelis that have said that it's a problem. And I want peace and security for both Israel and Palestine. And this does not get Israel any peace or security.
Look at that. He, under his breath, he's like, I doubt that. Look.
Yeah.
This is the part I want to give Cenk credit because, like, obviously we're dealing with a lot of really unsavory types here online who are making excuses for October 7th in ways that are just completely disgusting. So,
yeah,
at least go ahead.
Well, I mean, no, you're completely correct. And I am glad, and I don't think Cenk is lying. I think he's completely honest. He doesn't like Hamas.
I agree. Yeah.
And that he does, want Israel and the Palestinians to have some kind of security to live their lives in peace. So I do give him credit for that. Now, because the conversation has become as contentious as it has, and because Cenk has sort of thrown you want the children to die at Douglas Murray claim,
Here we go.
Douglas Murray doesn't believe, I assume Douglas Murray in his own view doesn't actually believe Cenk and thinks Cenk is just a bad faith actor in terms of what he's saying here. So when Cenk makes his overture about Hamas being bad, that could be useful for the audience, but it's not going to be necessarily useful to Douglas because he just doesn't believe it. He thinks he's lying. So
and Douglas undercuts him by saying, "I doubt that." Like everyone heard what he said there.
Of course, yeah. Cyborg for $20 says, "I got busy for a few months and wasn't able to watch live as much. I came back and found myself wrenchless. Who took my wrench away and why?"
Look, we had a bunch of people that had wrenches from like eons ago that I took wrenches from because like I don't know that they even watch the stream anymore. So a bunch of randoms. So like if anyone lost their wrench, just let me know and I'll obviously return it. So
Cyborg has a wrench back.
There was also a bunch of people like there's 2 different types of wrenches now, which is like I kind of cleaned that up.
Oh, really?
Well. So yeah.
Okay. Understate for 20 Canadian, thank you, says booze infested into a near coma, so I can't think of anything better to say other than Bonnie A. Thank you. Hopefully 2024 will be a better year. Victory to the Enlightened Centrist in the Tim Barbenheimer Civil War. Well, thank you, Understate. There you go.
But when you ask the other side, do you mind tens of thousands of civilians that have been murdered, incinerated alive, body parts picked out of rubble, little babies killed over and over again in what is even the Israeli prime minister is referring to as Amalek meaning an extermination of the Palestinian people.
No, you
and I
can't
must
just make this
clarify
stuff up.
the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust. A genocide is when you target a specific people
that's nice
and
of
kill
you.
a lot of civilians. Srebrenica, where 6,000 people were killed, was considered a genocide. So it doesn't mean you try to murder every single person
All right,
in
but
that
Cenk, let me ask
race.
you-
That is a Holocaust.
But
let me-
Cenk,
let me- let me
Definitely-
reply.
definitely
Cenk,
a
wait, one
genocide
second,
by
before
every
I get
definition.
before I go to Douglas, Cenk.
This is kind of interesting. Cenk is sort of in the inverted, at least in this moment, is in the inverted position of Hassan versus the Ethan conversation, because Cenk made the claim. He said, "Listen, I'm willing to say that Hamas is awful and what they did is wrong. Why are you not willing?" Or he said people. He said broadly, which I don't think is actually accurate. I don't know what people he's referring to, but he said, people aren't willing to say that the death of Palestinians is not equally wrong or as wrong. Which, I mean, I don't know what media Cenk is consuming. Maybe if you're just looking at like Ben Shapiro and Alan Dershowitz or something, maybe that's the case. But it's fascinating because that is sort of the inverts of the Ethan Hassan conversation. And I'm curious, I don't remember. I'm curious if Douglas addresses that or not. Because he said I'd be willing to address that before Pierce, kind of interrupted. So
Cenk talked to Hassan, I believe, about Israel-Palestine, but I don't think I ever listened to it.
I didn't listen to it, no.
I wonder if there's anything interesting in there.
Right.
One question. You get rid of Hamas too, as does Douglas, as do I. If you don't do it the way that Israel is currently doing it, given that they live amongst the population, how else do you do it?
Yeah, there's an excellent way to do it, and there's the right way to do it. So let me explain. So war, this guy talks about, I love war. I go to all the conflict zones. So by watching it and rooting on for more death, I know something about conflict. You know nothing. So here's what reality.
That's so bad. That is so bad. That is so bad. He just threw like every single war journalist under the bus there. And I think probably inadvertently.
Yeah, well, this is what I said with, Cenk is like the blunt instrument. He is Jason.
Right.
Because, like, he gets too angry, he gets too emotional. So, Douglas is making more calculated attacks, and Cenk is kind of like the bull in the china shop, just knocking everything over. And you're right, that's a very good point. He's not just attacked Douglas, but in his anger, he's attacked all war journalists unfairly.
Yeah. Those people
Which-
risk their lives. Many of them have been killed in conflict zones just so that we could get a fair assessment of what's actually going on.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm sure Cenk has talked about the Palestinian journalists or even non-Palestinian journalists that have died in Gaza,
Yes.
from the war.
Yes.
So yeah, but this is the bluntness and the ineffectiveness of Cenk's kind of attacks in the way in which he attacks people often.
Yes.
So
These words bloody more than they cut. He's not the surgeon he wants to be.
yeah, and there comes in these sorts of conversations. I feel like it's funny because we're talking a lot about like reciprocal violence. In these conversations, you also have to have a kind of like reciprocal insults.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, so Douglas attacks him, so Cenk attacks him back, which I don't think was effective, but okay, he attacks him back. But then when you kind of move on to the next like round of conversation, I feel like every like next round of conversation should be looked at as like
A chance to retreat.
well, not a chance to retreat, but a chance to like start anew.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, to not just keep being the person, to keep the attacks roiling, to kind of try to answer the question without necessarily throwing the personal insults out,
I don't think once you pull the knife out, I don't think you go, let me put this back in my pocket. Let's be nice now.
Well, no, I'm not.
I feel like once you start fighting, it's like, it's game on.
I know that's your attitude, Adam. Okay.
Well, look, I'm guilty. I'm totally guilty. I admit it. Look, maybe this is a better strategy to be like, okay, but it's just, look, once, I guess the level is really how you perceive the insult. Like it could, it could be a grenade, right? It could be just a little, a little tap,
Sure.
Who knows what it is? But I do feel like the shut up was like, okay, Someone pulled out a gun.
Right, right. No,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
that and the you don't care about the 8,000 babies.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But it's not, see, the analogy I would use, the imagery is not, you shouldn't put the knife away. You should have your sword at the ready,
Right.
but you should have it ready to counterattack as opposed to just constantly stabbing every chance you can. Okay.
That's good. That's a good analogy.
Is war gets you more war, but peace actually works. So when Israel did a peace deal with Egypt, not only were the Egyptians safe, but the Israelis became safer. That peace deal has held for decade after decade. So how do you do a peace deal in this case? What you do is you do the two-state solution now, and you do it with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And if you then have a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority would have the credibility to drive out Hamas from Gaza. That is a realistic plan for both peace, security for Israel and the Palestinians, and driving out Hamas. The idea that you're going to kill 20,000 more civilians, 200,000 more civilians in Gaza, and it's going to drive out Hamas.
Okay, let Douglas
Let me answer that.
Let
First of all,
Douglas respond.
So first of all,
Yeah, do you want to weigh in on the credibility of this plan?
Cenk stealing my plan from October 8th. Okay. That's what I was like, literally what I said, like, the day or two after the attack happened. I said that would
Right.
be a potential. But I also said, unlike Cenk, is that I said that could be a completely far-fetched idea.
Right.
Because I don't know if the PA is even willing to do that at all, or even has the credibility to engage in that action. And I said this to Cenk. Part of what I said to Cenk when we talked to him, because he said this, and I said, "Listen, I made a similar idea, but what I think Cenk is missing here is that the PA doesn't have the manpower, the credibility, or the weapons to do this on their own. Even if the PA was to utilize the plan Cenk's talking about, it would require Israel to basically be the military force backing up the PA.
Or arm the PA, which I don't, if that's a security threat, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, well, first of all, even if they arm them, the PA is not going to, I'm assuming, is nowhere near as trained or disciplined as the IDF, right?
Right, yeah.
So I don't even know if that would be effective.
Well, I meant the training would be part of the arming, obviously.
Sure, but
so.
yeah, but this is something that has to take place quickly. But the problem is, it's like, and when I said this at the time, I said, like, this is kind of my pie in the sky idea. I think that idea would only work or have worked if Israel had positive relations with the PA and was not having all the settlers fucking around in the West Bank.
Right.
I think the fact that Israel has all that problem in the West Bank has sort of completely screwed up that idea. But even all that aside, even if theoretically the PA was on board with this and they could do all this, that didn't really answer the question. The question would be, that would be the question of who rules the area. The question that Pierce asked was, how do you root out Hamas in the first place? Because even if they were working with the PA, I don't know if Israel would be doing that much differently tactically in terms of types of bombs they're dropping, where they're dropping the bombs, and doing all those things. It's just that afterwards the PA would kind of come in and, secure the area.
Yeah, would the PA go in and take on Hamas? I don't
know. Yeah,
they're not going to want to do
would
that.
They go
they're
going to
be like,
tunnels?
This is a suicide mission. We're going on a suicide mission for Israel. They'd be like, fuck off.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I don't think that's a very viable idea in terms of the way that he's phrasing it. But.
Even if you play this scenario out, let's say Israel doesn't go in immediately. Let's say Israel just builds up military forces on the border of Gaza and says, give us the hostages back, right? How's that going to play out? They're not going to give them the hostages
They're
back.
not, yeah.
Yeah, so they're just going to be losing time. They're going to be fortifying their positions. And sooner or later, Israel's going to have to go in anyway.
Yeah, and I know that, like, earlier, in other videos, Cenk has kind of made the, quote, special forces argument, which, to me, I've never heard anyone explain how that would actually look, and it sounds like a BS argument to me. Like, the magical special forces are going to teleport into the tunnels and kill all the bad guys. This doesn't seem realistic, but,
Look,
I'm not an expert in that.
It's super easy to second guess the strategy, but I, in all honesty, can't I mean, it doesn't seem like any strategy is going to get them closer to rooting out Hamas, which everyone agrees is the goal, faster or more efficiently than the strategy that they've engaged in. Yeah, public opinion has turned on them on a dime. Maybe they would go in with more public opinion if they waited on the border for 2 weeks. I don't know that they'd be in a better position. I've contemplated that. Like, they lose 2 weeks and maybe they have a better position going in. I'm curious what you think of that.
Well, I don't think. I mean, I'm not aware of the argument being that Israel should like waited. It was more just that Israel should, they can engage, but engage in a not like without bombing everything, essentially.
They don't
Right.
want to go in until they bomb everything, though. That's the thing.
I know, no, I know,
Yeah.
right? But that's
Yeah.
what the people have a problem with. And
Well,
I'm
no, but if they
assuming,
waited 2 weeks without bombing anything, they do
Mhm.
like, you've got our hostages, we want our hostages back. Like, they've killed 0 Palestinian people, right?
right?
Do they have a better position going in 2 weeks when they do start bombing everything?
No,
The
I don't
reason
think
they
it would
want to
make a
bomb
difference. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason they want to bomb everything is because, they're assuming all of these places of interest are booby trapped. So they're like, we're going to blow the shit out of it and make sure it's safe once we go in there.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem is that I assume, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming Israel has enough intelligence to know not only that there's all these tunnels everywhere and all these bases everywhere, but that, and I'm sure they have experience that they're all booby trapped, as you said. So going in physically is very dangerous.
Dangerous. Yeah, exactly.
And obviously you would think like, okay, so Hamas, they knew they were engaging in this action. Now, supposedly there's intelligence that they didn't know exactly when it was going to happen, but they knew that they've been planning this thing for like a year or 2 years. So you think they would be prepared and have some sort of plan in how to fight back if Israel were to start invading the tunnels, with men and stuff. So
Yeah, no, Hamas is ready. They knew
yeah,
this was going to happen. Obviously, they're ready.
right. But see,
Yeah.
that's the sort of the tragedy of the whole situation. Part of what annoys me when I hear the anti-Israel side is I've never really heard any of them give a clear explanation of what would be the proper military response other than the magical special forces.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
secret
not really
button that they have to press and all Hamas just dies.
right. And
Yeah.
I listened to some people talk about special forces even, I listened to some, there's some podcasts that Jocko Williams put out, and there's some podcasts of some other special force people. And even this, it's like it's all very vague and misty, right? And I get it, like, I'm just some civilian and you don't know exactly what's going on the ground. But until I hear like the actual explanation of how any of this would logistically work, it all just seems like nonsense to me. It's like, okay, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
Respond to that.
First of all, I mean, your other guest, I mean, I don't know what kind of a creature he is. He's a kind of low-grade thug as far as I can see. He's listened to nothing I've said.
Yeah.
This is so bad. I feel horrible laughing, but it is kind of hysterical.
Okay, so the ad homs have continued. He's a creature in a
Right.
low grade. See, this is so fascinating. This is why Douglas Murray is very sharp. He's very sharp because, I laid out the imagery. Douglas Murray is like a skilled assassin / surgeon.
Right.
Cenk is like the like blunt instrument. And so Douglas Murray instantly recognizes this, and so he calls him a low-grade thug, which is
I know.
yeah,
He uses the thug.
right, which would exactly be the visual description of the person who's using the blunt instrument. So it's like when he says a low-grade thug, you think of like some like James Bond, like some lackey, right, with like a baseball bat or something.
Right. Yes, but no, I also think he used the thug terminology to get him on the social justice stuff. Because thug is considered like a racial slur for a lot of people. But
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I don't know if that would be like a very Machiavellian move there, right? I'm not sure that's like a whole nother level, but
he is the assassin here. Come
Yeah,
on,
it's
what's going
possible.
on?
it's possible, So usually that's to like it's supposed to be like a racial insult to black people. I don't think it's really a racial insult to like people of Turkish descent.
I know my new word when Sitch gets out of control.
What's that?
It's pugilist.
What the? Okay, listen. Okay, that's a word I've never heard before. So you'll never
You,
hear me say that one.
you pugilist.
Pugilist? What does that mean?
You look, he calls him an online pugilist in this conversation.
Oh,
I
does
was
he?
like, yeah. Remember our debate over the origin of new words coming from Adam?
That's not. Yes, pugilist is not a Sitch word.
Now Douglas Murray has given me one. The
Pugilist
pugilist.
is like an old timey boxer.
Yes, totally.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I know,
You
because I'm Muslim. That's what we call all
something.
Muslims.
I'll tell you.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so he immediately, yeah, so you're right. He immediately goes into it's thug is a racial slur against Muslims.
Yeah, look, he set him up. He
Interesting.
set him up.
Maybe, which is not even. I mean, that's not a stereotype for Muslims that I've heard. I don't know. Maybe it's like a British thing in America. You know, the thug is supposed to be a racial insult to black people, not to Muslims. So.
Right.
No,
yeah.
it's not that at all. I just think that I think you're just a very low rent racist. But anyway, let me just get on to it. You say first of all, I don't care about the death of Palestinian children. Yes, I do care. I care very deeply about it. But I also know that the responsibility for their deaths lies on Hamas, which has misgoverned their society for the last 16 years and now has been leading the country into being in a war with Israel. So yes, it's on Hamas this. As for seeing wars, by the way, I just mentioned about seeing wars because as far as I can see, you're very ill.
That's like a perfect response to the death argument. It is Hamas's responsibility.
Yeah, it's a perfect rhetorical response.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with it like 100%.
Right.
But it is a good thing to acknowledge the death, but to say it's not Israel's fault.
There is a certain point that obviously I think the collateral damage does become Israel's fault.
Yes, of course.
I just look, until we have realistic numbers, it's impossible for me to say where we are in adjacent to that line. So obviously people are like inflating the numbers on both sides. So it's difficult to say. Obviously Israel probably has better numbers on this, but yeah.
Realistic numbers and a better understanding of what exactly is causing the civilian casualties, as I said.
The tactical situation.
Which just it annoys me because like I just feel like all the people that make all these comments about this, none of them know any of this information.
Totally. That's what drives me insane. It's like, how can you know that?
Yes. Yeah. So.
And now has been leading the country into being in a war with Israel. So yes, it's on Hamas this. As for seeing wars, by the way, I just mentioned about seeing wars because as far as I can see, you're very ill-traveled as well as rather ill-lettered and ill-spoken. And I mention that I cover wars and go to wars because I happen to think myself that it's worth seeing things with your own eyes, including things that you don't particularly like, but you report the truth. I don't know if you ever even leave your own bedroom. And I can tell already that you don't because you've already said something that demonstrates you know nothing about this conflict. You have just demonstrated it in the following terms. You said that this is why we need to push for a two-state solution and give legitimacy to the Palestinian Authority. I'll tell you something you don't know because I guess you spent no time in the West Bank, have you? I'll tell you something you probably don't know. The Palestinian Authority, Fatah, celebrated the 7th of October massacres. I'll give you another fact which demonstrates you know nothing about this and clearly haven't ever visited any Palestinians in the West Bank as I have. If there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, the reason why there isn't one is because if there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, Hamas would win. So your idea of a two-state solution, I'm afraid you are so out of date and you really should leave your bedroom. Because in this region, nobody thinks that there is a two-state solution on the table because there is not a viable negotiating partner. But I just want to make one other main point. You have gone on and on tonight, throwing accusations out against the Jewish state, against me. It's the sort of thing you do. I know you're a sort of online pugilist and think you can run for office, and good luck with that. But I'd just like to point out that you only really get animated if the Jews are involved. And I can tell that for the following reason. I mean, your surname's Uyghur, isn't it? 1 million Uyghur Muslims in China have been put in concentration camps in the last decade. And people of your ilk never really care about that, do you? Because it's not the Jews doing it, it's the Chinese Communist Party. At the moment, 1 million people who are in Pakistan at the moment, who are your fellow Muslims and who happen to be Afghan, and I don't think you care about them, do you? 1 million Afghans are currently being forcibly deported from Pakistan to Afghanistan. You don't care about that. You're not riled up about that. You're not riled up about what the Janjaweed are currently doing in Sudan, where thousands and thousands.
Hey, look, I hate to put a stop to it, but it's who's putting words in whose mouth now? I mean, come on, let's be real here.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, this is, now it's Douglas's turn to like just make up kind of a straw man of, Cenk being anti-Semitic, which, as as I'm sure everyone's watching knows, we've seen many Cenk clips. Cenk, his whole persona is to get very angry and animated at like everything.
Yeah, everything racist, everything anti-Semitic. Yeah,
right.
Yes.
Yeah, any everything Republican, right wing, every airline work. Right. So just, but no, so it's like, yeah, it's not fair to say that like he only gets animated about like Jews. Like that's just completely not. I don't think that's even remotely true whatsoever.
He gets animated about everything.
Yeah,
That's basically what Sitch is saying.
Right. That's his persona is like he's the guy, he's the bull in the china shop that gets angry at everything.
Right.
The thing so I think this whole line of attack is completely unfair. Maybe you say, well, it's warranted because, Cenk did the whole you don't care about kids dying thing. I don't know. My kind of thought process is if someone attacks you, you can attack them back. But I don't think you can attack them back, but I think the goal should be to not attack them back in a way that perpetuates the
cycle of violence.
The cycle of violence, yeah. Like, defend yourself and attack them back, but not perpetuate the cycle of violence. I get it's like a difficult thing to try to like figure out how to do without coming out. You don't want to be too weak. You don't want to be too timid. Kind of like a complicated juggling act. In terms of the PA thing, that's kind of interesting is, obviously, yeah, if the Palestinian Authority itself is celebrating October 7th, you can't really work with them. I don't know how much of that is true. Some people, I'm sure some people were, and there's some reports that like there were schools that were run by the Palestinian Authority that were doing it. I don't know if the Palestinian Authority made an official statement. I don't believe they did.
Condemning the attacks.
I don't know if they made an official statement condemning or not the attacks. I don't know if they made any official statement on it whatsoever. Obviously, the West Bank is very. I wouldn't be surprised if polling shows that the majority of people in the West Bank are fine with it, right?
Of course,
wouldn't surprise me. So but this is sort of the problem is, you have a situation where obviously people in Gaza are have a lot of bad situation. Before this, there was kind of mixed polling. Some polls showing that people supported Hamas, some polling showing people really hated Hamas. And now, again, you get mixed polling where it seems like some people in the West Bank support Hamas more after the Israel's attack or bombing campaign, I should say, and after Hamas's attack. Or you see some polling where it's, still low support from Hamas. But then like the West Bank, it's like, okay, I think Israel has a lot of responsibility and blame in terms of the negative perception of them in the West Bank because they keep fucking with the West Bank to such a large extent that it's understandable that a lot of people in the West Bank have such a negative view of Israel at this point.
Yeah, they're doing all the settler stuff and the Palestinian Authority. They don't have any real power in my understanding. So it's no-win situation, obviously.
I mean, this is really the problem of Netanyahu sort of aligning himself with the settler coalition, essentially. To create a system that's not going to produce any positive outcomes, right?
Yeah. We listened to a podcast a while back and reviewed it on the show. You can go back and listen to it, where Bibi Netanyahu's goal was to annex a huge chunk of the West Bank. And he basically made an announcement that he was going to do it, and Trump got super mad at him and told him, yeah, there's no way you're going to do this. The Abraham Accords actually came out of this whole snafu.
To
So,
prevent
but
that from happening.
yeah, but now, I mean, it seems like that's what's happening. It seems like Bibi Netanyahu is annexing Gaza and probably going to annex part of the West Bank.
Yeah, it's really dependent on what his political future looks like, how long
Right.
he'll be in power, if he will manage to retain power. It seems so unlikely because even the people that are very pro-war, the polling is just everyone fucking hates BB. Which makes sense because they number one, they blame him for allowing the attack to happen. They blame him for the slow response, and they blame him for his sort of attitude of thinking that he could, I guess, bribe off Hamas by allowing them to get money, um,
Right.
into the
Yeah.
area, and it just obviously all of that's backfired and blew up in his face. So
Look, the question I would have in polling is how do they feel about annexation? Even if Bibi's got to go, which I agree with you.
right,
He has to go, and I think the people of Israel think he has to go. I don't know how they feel about annexation as far as neutralizing the security threat, which
well,
I just
right.
look, the October 7th attacks are going to make everyone just take a huge step to the right. They're obviously going to be more weary
Right.
of peace deals.
No, that's a good question. And even before October 7th in this year, I think it was like March or something or April, I had seen polling in Israel where it showed that the majority it was something like the majority of Israelis citizens were not in favor of a two-state solution anymore.
Right.
Um,
Oh,
they,
yeah,
they,
yeah, yeah.
so I wouldn't be surprised if, especially after that, they're not,
Yeah, this
that's
is
just going to pull away from the two states. I mean, unless something drastic happens, I don't see a two-state solution. I don't even see how a two-state solution is even viable or possible anymore. I have no clue what's going to happen with West Bank. I think Gaza is going to become annexed by Israel, and I think West Bank will just they'll keep, doing what they're doing until they annex the whole thing. So I think two-state solution is completely not existent anymore after October 7th. But
do you think that they're going to claim Gaza as just Israel proper and just be done with it?
well,
I'm wondering if that's going to
I don't
happen,
know
or if
because the problem, I think that'd be
that'd
it's
be the best
difficult.
solution.
I think that might be the best solution, but the problem is that the Israeli government doesn't want to give the Palestinians citizenship.
They're going to carry on the charade that it's Gaza's independent, even though they're going to have massive security forces that, like, they're going to build a military base right in the middle of that thing.
Yeah, like what they might have to do is basically take over Gaza. It becomes part of Israel. They pretend it's not part of Israel, so they don't have to give them citizenship, and then just hope that they can like build up the region over the next 10, 20 years to sort of cool down Israeli hatred enough so that they could feel better giving people in the region citizenship so they could vote and do things of that nature.
They
I don't
got to
know.
deal with the citizenship issue.
Well, because then it literally would be an apartheid state if they take over and they don't let them vote.
Yeah.
But I understand why they wouldn't necessarily want them to vote because it's like, okay, well, do you want a population that wants you all to die to have voting rights in your country?
That's what they're
You know?
worried about.
Right.
That's what they're nervous about.
Well, and then also so like if they take over Gaza and they say, okay, this is just Israel now, and you're all Israeli citizens, well, then wouldn't that grant all the people, some of whom could still be terrorists or have terrorist motivations, especially after all the bombing, they would have free range to go anywhere in Israel, right? Which
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
make it more difficult to monitor security threats. So that's why they are in this sort of like wacky situation where it's like I don't know if they really can absorb Gaza, especially at this point, into Israel.
Yeah, it's a no-win situation. There's no good way to manage this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
It's
the best thing for them would just to be like, I don't know if they would do, I don't know if it would be done. The best thing would be them to say, okay, Egypt, this is your problem now. Gaza is now just literally part of Egypt, because then it's not their problem, right?
They're not.
Just Egypt. Look, I don't think Egypt would agree to that.
Yeah. Look, I'm also, I don't know. I know why Egypt doesn't want that, because it's a threat to their political system, obviously, for the
Of
same
course.
reason like Israel doesn't want to make them all citizens. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know Israel's political system. Like in America, there's a certain amount that you can absorb without really changing the political dynamic. I mean, you're talking about 2 million people. I mean,
Right,
that
but we're a
radically
massive
changes.
country. Israel's a small country.
Yeah, that
Also, we're
massively
not
changes the
right.
political dynamic.
We're not absorbing 2 million people who hate our country and want us to be destroyed, right? Like,
Well, yeah, no, I'm
know,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
That
Look,
that would have a
theoretically,
significant difference, but
theoretically,
yes.
you could absorb. Theoretically, we probably have at least 2 million people in America that hate America and want to see America destroyed anyway, right? I mean,
I guess
they're
yeah,
part of the
maybe,
political
sure.
system.
Right.
That's
yeah,
all, that's like
they're on
Hassan's
Twitch.
audience.
Yeah, right. They're part of Hassan's audience. Sure. There you go. Right.
So
Yeah.
I just, yeah, I don't know the population of Israel. I also don't know, like in America, we have this very much kind of binary Republicans Democrat thing. I don't know in Israel if it's some of these other nations have it set up where, you know, if you have 20% of the population, you can all of a sudden have some sort of political party that has some power.
Oh, sure. Well, that's
Like, yeah.
It's actually worse because they have the parliamentary system.
Right.
That's why Netanyahu is able to build his coalition with the minority of people who are like the settlers and religious types. And then like Israel right now, they only have a population of 9.7 million, right? So like
Okay.
absorbing 2 million people
20%. Yeah.
is like a huge impact on their electorate.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thousands of people are being attacked by the Islamist militia there. You don't care about any of that. You get exercised and you rile up what little base you have of malcontents because you're riled up when the Jews do anything.
All right,
it's
Cenk.
perfectly obvious.
Okay, Cenk, your response.
Yeah.
Did you like the graphic of like it opening up and Pierce like inserting himself in the map?
I know. Let me come in here.
It's like break it up, break it up. Okay, now it's your turn to fight, Jake.
Look, should he have addressed all of these insults? I mean, it's like a blizzard of insults here. There's your presidential campaign. There is the you don't care about the Jews. There's like, it's a long list. He should have been writing these down.
That would have been a funny thing. He's like, let's wait. He's like, hold on. I have to look at the long list of insults you just threw at me to respond to every single one of them, you know, because you're concerned more about insults than time with the subject, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like these are cutting. These are bad. These are terrible insults. He's basically eviscerating his credibility here.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like he should answer them. He does answer the Jewish one.
Right.
Okay, first of all, my last name is Uyghur. We're named after the Uyghur Turks in China. And have we talked about
I
that
thought
on the
you'd
Young
have spoken
Turks?
up then.
Yes. Yes, we've talked about it endlessly, but you don't know that, and you don't watch the show.
Shame
you just
nobody
make
watches
things
your
up.
show.
So
Nobody does watch your show.
Yeah, well,
This is so bad, Sitch.
Well, no, see, but this is
So
where
bad.
I think this is like stupid for Douglas to go down this track because this is like he says okay, you don't talk about this thing, and then he says, well, no, we do talk.
We
about
do
this
talk
thing.
about it, yeah.
And then he said, and then his response is, well, nobody watches your show. It's like, well, wait a minute, so you just made that up when you said no, we don't talk about it because you don't watch and you don't know what we're talking about, and it's not true. They do get a lot of views, which Cenk brings up. So I do think this is a pretty weak line of attack from Douglas to go down this road.
Right. Notice this clip didn't go viral.
Right.
okay, again, you're interrupting me when I was kind enough to let you go on with your mad ramblings. So how nobody watches the show, we have 5 billion views a year. I don't know what piddling outfit
everyone
you're
on
on,
Earth.
or
Wow.
what little Substack or whatever the hell you write on. So the reason we're incredibly popular
I
is
only
we
write
fight
for all
for
the main
all.
newspapers. I
We
don't have
fight
my
for
own Substack,
shut
I know.
up. We fight for all innocent civilians. So yes,
No, you
we've covered
don't.
all of those conflicts. Yes, I'm against fundamentalist Islam,
don't
no
care.
question about it. I'm against fundamentalist religions of all kind. In terms of
This is where like, it's the cattiness is just off the charts here.
every right-wing supporter of Israel, their only tactic is, hey, don't look at the 8,000 murdered children. Don't look at the 6,400 murdered women. Don't look at the fact that all the hospitals
Hamas
in northern
figures,
Gaza have been
Hamas
shut
figures.
down. Don't look at the fact that 4 out of 5 people in northern Gaza are starving right now, and half of the people in southern Gaza are starving. Instead, anti-Semite. Now, wait a minute. I just told you how much I
never
want
said
peace and
that. I
security
never
for
said you're an
Israel.
anti-Semite.
How much I hated what happened on October 7th. What you don't know is I started the Young Turks with 2 Jewish friends. And so the whole program is both
Yeah, who
Jews
both
and
departed,
Muslims.
didn't
You
they?
know nothing. You know nothing. I have Jewish family
I
and
think your
friends.
Jewish colleague
Why in
left,
the world,
didn't
gods,
they?
as
Yeah.
they go
See,
to
this
Israel?
is like
Sitch, if you're in a debate and you're arguing how you're not an anti-Semite, you're losing. Like,
well, I mean, I don't know, because like, I mean, this is the woke tactic, right? You're a racist.
I know.
And then you have
This
to
is why
defend
it's so
yourself.
effective.
I guess, right? Yeah, because it's just. But then, you know, the counter, like all the cattiness and the sort of cross chatter from
Murray, yeah.
from Douglas here, I think was pretty weak, because he's like, well, I never called you an anti-Semite. It's like, whoa,
He
whoa, whoa,
did.
whoa. What are you talking about? You literally
He
said,
did.
yeah, like, what do you mean you did? You were saying he only cares about getting angry about the Jews. Okay, don't back out now, right? And then he doubles down, because then he's like, oh, we started Young Turks with 2 Jewish people, and he's like, well, they left, and they like implying that they left because
I never called you an anti-Semite, but why did your friends leave the Young Turks?
Yeah, why did your Jewish friends leave? So it's just like, I mean, I think Douglas had a strong showing at the beginning. I think this is a very weak showing, this part. So
this is why this part didn't get clipped. Well,
yeah,
maybe this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Why would anyone on the left clip this?
Well, the thing is, no one would clip it, because it's, first of all, it's a weak showing from Douglas, so it's not getting clipped by the right or the anti-Cenk crowd. It's not particularly a strong showing by Cenk, so it's not going to get clipped by the left or by him.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Look, just arguing that you're not an anti-Semite, just, I don't know. Don't do it.
But what is this? What is the? How do you deal with this? What is the proper strategy to deal with this?
When they call you up and say, hey, we want you to debate Douglas Murray, say, hell no.
Right. I guess.
Hell no.
Right. Okay. Sure.
Look, you tell me. What do you think the proper strategy is?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, maybe it's just to call him out as being woke. I have no clue.
I thought for a second there he was going to try to bring the temperature down. He's like, look, I let you speak. I was nice enough to let you speak. But then he's like, during your mad ramblings.
Right. Well, I mean,
I was like, okay.
Okay. So at this point in the conversation, I don't think bringing the temperature down is like possible. Okay. You had, Cenk threw the, so Douglas throws the, you're stupid or evil. Cenk throws the, you don't care about 8,000 people dying because you want them all to be genocided. And then Douglas responds with the whole, well, you just hate Jews. Okay.
Right.
So like this point, I don't think there is any temperature lowering at this point in the conversation.
It does seem like it's escalating, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. It's just continually escalating.
What's next? Who knows? It can only get worse.
Yeah.
I want them to be safe, okay? So I have shown empathy for all civilians throughout everything I have ever done. But all you have is hatred. Oh, he's an anti-Semite. Kill the Muslims. Kill the Palestinians. And once we kill them, by the way, we'll blame them for it. Israel had to murder all those babies in Palestine because Hamas made us do it. Then why are you listening to Hamas? Why are you letting Hamas drive your agenda? Well, you don't have to kill those civilians. It's a mass assassination factory.
We are, 9 weeks into this?
Jarring cut. Jesus.
What do you think happened there? Because look, there's a huge cut there. He's in the middle of his talk.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what happened there. Yeah, what did happen there?
And then all of a sudden they come back and it's like a complete tone shift.
I don't know.
Like,
Maybe it
what?
got really crazy. Yeah,
It feels
I wish there's a way to find out. Because they private their like they stream live and then they private them afterwards. So
Oh, do they? Okay.
yeah, because I
didn't know.
watched one live and then I go back and you can't watch anymore. It's not like unlisted. It just I believe it's privated, so I don't know.
Cenk pulled his pants down and said, "Kiss my ass."
Who knows? Who knows?
All right. Tone change.
Yeah.
Maybe the moderator came in and just was like, okay, I gotta throw a lifeline here. This thing's gonna end up in someone
Why?
being killed
This is
in
what
the
you
parking
want.
lot.
What do you mean? This is what Pierce wants. This is what drives the views.
Yeah, okay. That's
I mean,
probably not
the
what
clip is
happened.
this interview is literally titled, quote, "You're a monster." Cenk Uygur versus Douglas Murray in Israel.
You're a monster.
You're a monster.
Okay.
20,000 people, according to the Hamas-run health authority, but the numbers have not been questioned by other official bodies. 20,000 people so far have died on the Palestinian side. And
Yeah, you're right. That 20,000 number's been around for like a month now.
I feel like, yeah, it's just weird.
Yeah. They're fighting, but the number just stays the same.
Right.
Maybe it was an estimate.
I don't know.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.